For the 15th year in a row, Boston will celebrate the holidays with performances of A Christmas Celtic Sojourn. To tell us about this year's lineup is the host of Celtic Sojourn on WGBH Radio. We'd like to welcome Brian O'Donovan. Thank you very much for being with us, Brian.
Great to be with you, Chris. Thanks.
You've hit the big one 5 years, so you want to do something special. What have you got in mind?
Well, we really, we tend to celebrate such milestones as this, and 15 years is a surprise to us as it is to anybody. We started this back at the Somerville Theatre in 2003, thinking we would do one show a year. If that, we would have been very happy. To think that we've lasted 15 years and grown it to 15 shows in 5 different New England cities, I think merits some sort of celebration and perhaps a pulse check on our part. And what we've done this year to celebrate that is to bring even more talent to the stage. And we have a largest cast we've ever had, more singers than we've had, more individual musicians than we've had before, more dancers and more dancing in the show. So it's truly a kind of a whoop it up party, really celebrating those 15 years. Yeah,
and of course, people in Boston, oh, that's Irish music, but there's a lot more than just Irish here, right?
Yes, very, very much so. You know, we call it Celtic music. It's kind of a catch-all term, but it really describes music that is linked to each other, but largely coming from that upper northwest corner of Europe. So it includes the obvious ones, Ireland and Scotland and Wales, perhaps the most obvious in people's minds when they think Celtic. But of course that expands out beyond that into Galicia in northern Spain, which is now increasingly being accepted as a Celtic country. Its neighbouring province called Asturias, where they have the pipes, like bagpipes, what they're called gaitas.
Carlos Núñez, right?
Carlos Núñez is definitely the most famous proponent of that from Galicia. Brittany is another place that has a distinctive Celtic culture. Cornwall being incorporated into it, and of course the Isle of Man in between Ireland and Wales. And increasingly Cape Breton as well, up in Nova Scotia, which is a big Scottish population. So it really runs the gamut of a lot of different styles, and of course we call it the roots and branches of Celtic music. That's really what we're celebrating on stage within a Christmas motif.
When we talk about the Christmas motif here, what you're also hearkening back to is these small towns where you had, I guess, musicians and performers making house calls, right?
Really, there were a lot of traditions around. The English tradition was called wassailing, going around from house to house, often playing games or dressed in disguise. That came to Ireland as singing the wren, which is an ancient pagan tradition based around the small bird, the wren, W-R-E-N. And in Scotland, the variant of it is around New Year's more than Christmas, but still linked in with the season. And that's called hogmanay on New Year's Eve. But it's all about visiting, it's all about community, it's all about celebrating the fact, Chris, that people had survived in the early agrarian societies. Very dark time of the year where survival was often in the balance. So if they got past the solstice, basically on the 21st of December, there was cause to celebrate, and they did it by banishing the dark, lighting big fires, bonfires, lighting the fires inside. Evergreens were used, which is our tradition of Christmas tree and holly, the things that bloomed or that were green when everything else was dead in the middle of winter. And of course singing and dancing and maybe a touch of alcohol occasionally.
Just a touch.
Was featured.
This has been in news, and we're talking with Brian O'Donovan from A Celtic Sojourn. Brian, talk about some of the performers here. There's one that's a new one for me, Windborne. This is a vocal group from Scotland.
It is a vocal group, actually. They're kids of Irish American, English American, Scottish American, even French Canadian heritage here. American born kids, but they've really developed the great art of 4-part harmony singing. And they bring their talents this year to us for, of course, Christmas music, but some of their own distinctive work as well. Mary Campbell is a singer that's coming to us especially from Edinburgh in Scotland. She comes with a great pedigree and an amazing resume. And so we will be featuring some of the songs, particularly Auld Lang Syne, which is a feature of hogmanay. That'll become a central theme of our show this year and in a very, very impressive way, but that's a spoiler alert if I tell you exactly what will happen. And then of course we've got a lot of great Irish musicians, and Seamus Egan is our music director. We've got Liz Knowles, Irish traditional fiddler. We've got Jenna Moynihan, who's more steeped in the Cape Breton and Scottish style of music. Hayley Richardson is a 15-year-old girl who learned her music, having taken up the violin at 3 years old, is now regarded as possibly one of the best fiddlers ever to come from the US, and she's still only 15. So she's going to be joining us, and some great dancers as well. It's the usual cast of thousands, as I say.
Now, for people who haven't been to one of these and they have these preconceptions of what this music is like, they hear stuff around St. Patrick's Day, explain how this is different.
Well, it's interesting you say that. People do have a perception of it. Anybody who listens to my show on Saturday afternoons on WGBH will know that it's quite different. It's not, as my kids say somewhat disparagingly, it's not just diddly-dee music. This is very, very sophisticated. It's very broadly based. It has influenced and in turn been influenced by jazz and rock, other folk music, a lot of classical music. We'll include a piece of Mozart this year, for example, embedded in the middle of it. So a Celtic Sojourn and a Christmas Celtic Sojourn is more about celebrating musical and style in a Celtic style, not so much very, very rigorously from the core of that tradition. We're going to do a Catalan piece this year, for example, called Carol of the Birds, made famous by Pablo Casals. This is a piece that's embedded in our play this year. And it works because it's a gathering, as I said, gathering in the comfort of each other to celebrate a rich tradition at Christmas time.
One of the other people in the lineup, Natalie Haas, plays cello.
Natalie Haas is a cellist, a Juilliard graduate from one of the top schools in the world in classical music, but she chose Celtic music as her genre. Maeve Gilchrist, a graduate here of Berklee College of Music, is from Scotland and is a harpist, but it's not the old staid harp that we think about, the angelic harp. She's like a Jimi Hendrix style harp player. She really, really takes the best out of that instrument and plays it in a very, very different way. She's also happens to be our assistant music director, so not alone is she bringing her musical chops, she's bringing her creative chops with her as well.
Well, Natalie Haas, she played before with Alistair Fraser, I think.
She does still, yes.
And what's interesting is you got an instrument that you wouldn't have heard in a village pub 150 years ago, and yet it seems to fit right in.
It does. Essentially, it's like, it's in the fiddle family. And what Natalie has done, and other cellists as well around her age, is they've taken this instrument and really blended it very well in with ethnic or roots music generally. You hear cello now, for example, which you never heard before, in bluegrass. And these young people are able to play it at the speed. It was often difficult just because of the size of the instrument and the fretboard to play at speed, the speed required by a jig or a reel. But Natalie has changed that. And it's also just tonally a gorgeous piece. It's like the bass in a choir. It's down very, very low. It's very, very genteel and really fits in very well with what we do.
We should mention, I know you're performing at different locations around New England, but here in Boston, I think you've got 7 performances?
We've actually got 10 at the Cutler Majestic Theatre in downtown Boston, which is just such a beautiful, beautiful facility. It was designed by E.B. Jordan, who also did Jordan Hall of the Jordan Marsh Company, and it's one of his 2 theatres in the Boston area. And it's been renovated. I always say that the theatre is like a character in the play. It has to be something really special, and we feel so fortunate to be at the Cutler Majestic Theatre. I've heard it said that when you're sitting there, it's like sitting inside a Fabergé egg, and it really is, because it was renovated beautifully about 15 years ago by Emerson College. It's one of our favourite places to play.
Finally, we should mention that people do want some more details about dates and times and tickets. What's the best way to check that out?
Very simply, just go to wgbh.org/Celtic. That's wgbh.org/Celtic.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Chris.
Brian O'Donovan from A Celtic Sojourn.